Logan, we've been talking a lot about
Whoa,
Northfield.
whoa. Yeah, we
What?
have.
Sorry,
What?
that was a bit aggressive coming out of the gate there.
That's all good. What do you got for me?
Great.
Serve it up.
I think it's important to have a broader perspective, and so does the painting over my shoulder over here. That,
Yeah. That guy
that,
looks
that
familiar.
yeah, that fell up there is Alexander Faribault. And
Oh
I
my
think
God.
if you really want to understand the history of the region, sorry, I know I'm stepping on your toes a little bit. This is for a Northfield class, but I think we can learn a lot by visiting 15 minutes over. I think today we're going to talk about Faribault.
I'm in.
Hello, welcome to class.
Hey, everybody.
We hope you enjoyed learning about the great attempted Northfield bank robbery. If you guys have any questions about that, just let us know. If you're able to find some resources online, there's a lot of good stuff out there. Logan, how are you doing?
Yeah. What's that?
How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm living the dream. This has been really fun doing this, actually. And I'm glad to hear that the kids have been getting involved in various ways, and I hope they keep learning about stuff. And yeah. How about you, Mr.?
I really enjoy this. I love whenever I can visit with my mom's class and help them learn with different things. Some of you have met my bearded dragon Cornelia. She's skidding around on the ground while we're recording this right now. So if she comes by, maybe I'll have her say hello too. Logan, you live in Dundas, as we've mentioned before, and I live in Faribault. What is there to do in Dundas? What are the sites?
What is there to do in Dundas?
What are the sites?
Well, there are a lot of fields. I like walking in fields, personally. I spend a lot of time doing that. That's really fun. You could go to the downtown street that Dundas has. There's a couple buildings there. There's a new city hall. You could go look at the new city hall before it's completed. Dawn's Bar and Grill is good. They have okay hamburgers and a popcorn machine. They're great.
I'm thinking of a different geological feature that might connect the different things that we're talking about today.
Okay, yeah, I'm thinking. I think I'm getting there.
Yeah.
Archibald Mill. There's
Yep.
an old ruined mill there you can go to. And what notice about this mill, we talked about mills before, Dundas was powered by a really incredible mill. As far as mills go, this mill was, you've probably never seen anything like it. It was a solid mill. And back in its day, of course. Now it's not functional. In fact, it's destroyed. But it's on the Cannon River.
The Cannon River, the namesake of the Cannon River Valley.
Yes.
Huh?
Good connection, I said.
Yes. We've talked about this quite a bit. That was part of the draw for a lot of people that decided to settle in Northfield. But it wasn't simply because of the river. It's because there was already a lot of established trade and business and some recognizable community forming around this river. And a lot of that has to do with what was going on in what would become Rice County as a whole. Now, Northfield is in Rice County, which is in the state of Minnesota. A county is a small area that's essentially, it's easy to think of it as a collection of towns and villages that are all under one umbrella. And Rice County has Northfield and Dundas and Faribault. We've recently we talked about Alexander Faribault, the namesake of Faribault, a little bit. but we thought it might be helpful to look at his journey and see really how the formation of Rice County obviously goes in tandem with the formation of Northfield itself. Now, Logan, we both have pretty European names. Yours is, huh?
What?
We both have pretty European names. You're what?
We both have pretty what?
European
Okay.
names.
Yeah.
Temple is a pretty English name. Where's your name from?
Germany. Ledman was
Ledman.
Ledman is how it was once pronounced.
Mm-hmm. So are you 100% German?
No.
What are you?
Swedish, Norwegian, and German.
Okay.
Yep.
Well. That is interesting. So your name is one thing, but you are made up of all these other things. I know.
Yeah.
Temple is an English name, but I have Norwegian and Swedish and German all mixed in there.
Yeah.
Where do you think the name Faribault would be from? I've never met anyone with the last name Faribault.
No, neither have I. So it's probably, well, Faribault. But what's interesting about the name Faribault is it's got that thing where it's spelled Faribault. So it's spelled like we would pronounce it Faribault, but that's not how it's pronounced. It's pronounced Faribault. And I know there's some languages that do stuff like that. Like German does not do that. Spanish does not do that. Spanish is every sound in a Spanish word is pronounced. I think French is like that. It's like what you're talking about, where it's often like, oh, they are all like where the sound. It's just like they take out most of the letters in the word.
I remember that. Our first episode, you were fluent in French.
Yeah, that's right, and I still am.
But actually, it's disheartening it took you this long to get there. But
yeah,
about
I'm not an expert.
Huh?
I'm not an expert. I'm just fluent.
Oh, okay, I see. So you are right. Faribault is a French name.
Okay, so he was some French guy.
He was partially French. Part of it. His father's side of the family was French. They came over and actually lived in Canada after being in France, and that's what led them down to what is now Minnesota and the Midwest area. Alexander's name was, this is a fun name, Jean-Baptiste.
That's Alexander's father, his dad?
Yes.
Okay.
His father's name was Jean-Baptiste, and he was a fur trader. One thing that we mentioned is a lot of the early settlers in Minnesota were French people coming from Canada, and a lot of them were traders, because that's how you start, developing communities, developing the Western way of civilization is through trade. And Jean-Baptiste Faribault was one of those traders. He originally did not want to be a trader. Do you know what he actually wanted to be, Logan?
Jean-Baptiste?
Yeah.
Well, he wanted to be, if I remember correctly, he was big into painting.
Yes.
He wanted to be a painter. He wanted to work for the army as a painter, a guy who goes out, I'm sure you've all seen, I know kids these days are really into battlefield painting, so I think you guys have all seen this, like you Google like the Battle of Waterloo, which you should all do, and there's these big beautiful paintings, these oil paintings of the Battle of Waterloo. And how that happened is they had a guy up there who was like hangs out on a hill and like, hey, look at that battle. My job is to paint this battle. And he wanted to be that guy.
Why didn't he just take a picture?
The cameras weren't good enough yet. They
didn't exist.
Yeah, they were really a camera at that point was just, you would just take a box and you'd cut a hole in it and you just look through it, and then you'd try really hard to remember it later. And that was essentially all it was. They didn't figure out that you could put something in it so that you don't have to remember it later until like a couple of years later.
So Logan is making this very confusing. Cameras did not exist back then. They were not invented. So Jean-Baptiste was a rebellious young guy. His dad wanted him to study law or be a notary, work in the government. But he's like, nah, Dad, I don't want to do that. I'm gonna go away and be a painter, but he wasn't able to be a painter, so he's like, I'm gonna be the fur trader. So that's what he did, because there weren't a lot of other business options, and it was
Yeah, and
a
also
good.
because being a fur trader, that was like an adventurous idea too.
Yeah.
Go out into the wild. Minnesota, we mentioned this a little bit, was kind of the Wild West at that time. No one was out here except for the Dakota and Ojibwe people. And so French explorers saw it as someplace where people from Canada would be like, okay, so most Americans aren't out there yet. I can get in there before the Americans get there. And that's what they did.
That's right. So Jean-Baptiste was a young French guy looking for adventure, and that is when he started trading with the Dakota people in what is now Minnesota and Iowa, and all in the Midwest area. Well, that's fun. There's a lot of motion blur here. That's fun.
Yeah.
And that is when Jean-Baptiste met and fell in love with Pelagie. Pelagie. Pelagie, was it Ons?
Yeah.
I don't remember fully how to.
Inse.
Yeah.
Alza.
Thank you, fluent French.
I don't think it's French.
Fluent linguist. Jean-Baptiste met, fell in love with, and married Pelagie. Pelagie was also well, she wasn't French. Was she partially English?
I think so.
Okay. Well, Pelagie was part of European descent and part Dakota. So she was Dakota and European. So she understood both Jean-Baptiste's way of life and the Dakota people's way of life. So that would be very useful for trade. And it was common for fur traders to marry members of the cultures that they're trading with. Now, what a lot of fur traders would do, they would have different wives at every tribe they traded with. So that's not very special. But Jean-Baptiste was a Catholic, and he believed very strongly in devotion and marriage and all and loyalty, and only having one wife. So when it would have been socially acceptable for Jean-Baptiste to have multiple wives, he was loyal to Pelagie. And all signs show that they did have a strong relationship, with Pelagie being very involved in the fur trading business herself, which was very progressive for a woman at that time. And like we said, the Dakota people's culture, they would travel along the rivers, they would travel across prairies, they would follow the buffalo and the resources that they needed to survive. Around this time, America was also moving west, and they were building forts. And one of the forts that they built was near Prairie du Chien. I believe, is that in Iowa now or Wisconsin?
Yeah, it's in Wisconsin.
It's in Wisconsin. And that is where Jean-Baptiste and Pelagie set up one of their homes. And that is when they had their first two children, Lucy and Alexander. Alexander was the firstborn son of Jean-Baptiste and Pelagie. Now, when he was very little, we don't know exactly when Alex was born, but when he was a little less than 10 years old, there was a war breaking out in this area. And remember the Revolutionary War. America was fighting against Britain and to gain their independence, and now Britain wanted revenge. They wanted to get some of the territory back, but instead of invading from the ocean, they were invading from the north. They were invading from Canada. And they wanted to just burn and take over everything. They actually burned down the White House at this time. But on the way, they burned down Prairie du Chien. They destroyed Jean-Baptiste and Pelagie's home. And they actually captured Jean-Baptiste and tried to force him to fight for them. And they kept him locked away for a long time. But Pelagie had to think fast as they were coming through and invading. She scooped up Lucy and Alex, and she paddled for miles and miles and miles on the river to get to her Dakota family. And that is where Alex would have had a lot of formative years growing up. The first language he ever spoke was Dakota. So a lot of people, because his name is French, think of him as, oh, he must just be a French guy, but that doesn't paint the full picture. yes, he was part of his father's culture and he was raised in that. He too was a Catholic, as many French people were. Um, but his first language was Dakota. He grew up in this culture, and like we said, the Dakota culture believed that every living thing was sacred, part of your family. They took care of each other because that's what people do. Um, they had those relationships with people who they viewed as their family, even if they weren't directly blood related. They would take care of each other, and those were the things that Alex learned from his mother Pelagie, and those are the things that he would carry with him. Eventually, after the war was over, Jean-Baptiste, Alex's father, was released by the French, and started fur trading. Uh, now, Logan, what are some things that your dad has taught you? Are there any things that as you got older he taught you how to do, or your parents bestowed upon you as you got older?
And then my parents bestowed upon me as
Yeah,
I got older.
maybe certain things that only people that are older can do, things that you might need a license for.
Oh yeah, well my mom tried to teach me how to drive, and I get by most measures she was successful. I got my driver's license in part because of the help I got from her. So there's an example for you. Parents taught me work ethic to prepare me for getting a job in the real world. So there's a couple examples for you. You looking for anything more specific? You're just
Nope, that works.
hey,
Thanks.
yeah,
Uh,
perfect. Glad I'm always here to help.
yeah, what do you think? What do you think, Jean-Baptiste? And we've talked about kind of what Pelagie was able to teach Alex. What do you think, Jean-Baptiste? He got back. He's got
Yeah.
this young man, and he's gonna teach him about the world and skills he needs. What do you think Jean-Baptiste is teaching Alex?
Well, I bet Jean-Baptiste taught Alex a lot of the skills that he had learned about fur trading, about operating in that business, about how it worked, about how to manage trade, about how to be safe, about how to make sure you're protecting everybody who's involved in the trade, how to protect yourself. I imagine that he set up Alex to become a fur trader just like him.
That's right. Jean-Baptiste would take Alex and teach him how to trade, and eventually they would trade together. And then when Alex was old enough, uh, he was able to trade by himself, and that's what he did as a young adult. He would travel around. He'd have different places that he'd set up campsites that he would be with different tribes of the Dakota people, and he would trade with them. And at one point, when he was in his early 20s, Alex came. Wait, was he in his early 20s or was he still a teenager? Again, we don't fully know his birth date. Um, but when he was a young man, he came across this area in what would be called the Cannon River Valley. Um, it was
Hmm.
actually a place where two rivers met. It was the Straight River, which comes from Owatonna, and the Cannon River, which goes through Northfield and Dundas, like we said before.
Right.
Um, and it was a place where these two rivers met, which in the Dakota culture held a lot of significance. When two rivers met, that was very important. They said that was where life initially came, was from the meeting of two rivers. It was very important to their belief system, and it was very important to the Dakota living in the Faribault area at that time. So Alex decided that would be one of his trading post area, and that would be where he really laid down his roots as things went on. So he
What did that
traded for several more years. He began attracting people to the area, and especially it blew up once settlement was allowed by the United States government.
and what did that did he moved somewhere else, or do we know what that place is today?
What?
Do we know what's so he started building this trading post with a bunch of people in it. What is that place today? Is it
Well, that
around?
place today is the city of Faribault.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
That's great.
Of course, it took a while to get there. First, the people that he was attracting were the Dakota people. He wanted to move them closer to where the two rivers met, and that's kind of where the downtown area is today in Faribault, and that is what started attracting people to the region. In fact, one of the people that it eventually attracted in 1855 was John North.
Yeah.
Uh,
Northfield.
yeah, John North, in fact, before he went and founded Northfield, he was one of the founding members of Faribault, too. he signed those documents when they were mapped out. Faribault was mapped out a few months before Northfield, and after it was mapped out and John North signed the document, that's when he went and started his own town just a few miles away.
Wow.
And part of the success that they had attracting colleges and these different institutions to Northfield was a lot to do with the economic and social prosperity. Alexander would donate land for the Minnesota State Academy for the Deaf and the Blind, these different schools that they said that Minnesota wanted to have, and that Alex knew would be important if he wanted Faribault to thrive, having these educational institutions. In fact, Carleton College actually asked to be in Faribault before it ultimately ended up in Northfield. So the growth of these two towns were really important in connection with each other and building those things up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are just hitting. We've been talking for 20 minutes now. But do you want to? We talked a little bit in an earlier episode about this war that happened that pushed the Dakota people out. So we talked about that a little bit before, and this happens after Faribault was founded, after the town exists. But we also, people might remember that we mentioned that some Dakota people actually did stay, and that Alexander Faribault was involved in that. So I wonder if you could quickly talk to us a little bit about what that was, what that meant to Alex, and what that meant for him towards the end of his life.
That's right. So you remember that Alex was French and Dakota. He grew up in the Dakota culture. So that war would have been very, very hard for him because he had friends and family members on both sides of the conflict. He had family members, killed and injured on both sides of the conflict. When the war ended, that didn't stop the settlers being scared of and angry at the Dakota people, even those that weren't part of the fighting. And like we said, the Dakota people were not allowed in Minnesota anymore at that time. So Alex said that he took on as many people as he could, and he actually let some Dakota people stay on his land. He
Wow.
essentially set up a refugee camp for Dakota people that needed shelter, that needed a place to live, but they weren't able to get jobs because people didn't want to hire them. They weren't able to purchase their own homes because people didn't want to sell land to them. So a lot of them ended up having to go eventually because Alex actually ran out of money. He didn't have money to support these people that he considered family anymore.
Wow.
And shortly after that happened, Alex decided to leave Faribault. He left the town that he had started in the Cannon River Valley. And we don't have it written anywhere exactly why. The simplest reason could be he was no longer making money. Why was he no longer making money? Probably because he's the one that wanted to allow the Dakota people to stay when a lot of the townspeople weren't in favor of that anymore. He tried to have several different business ventures, but none of them were very successful, so he never quite got back the money that he lost from helping the Dakota. And he was penniless, essentially. Eventually, the townspeople did come together when Alex was an old man. He had several strokes. He was sick. And they said they decided to raise some money to give him a house in town and house him there. But when he died, he was still penniless. And it's not a stretch to think that the townspeople didn't really fully understand this man, even if they might have trusted him, they might have known him, partially because he was French. English wasn't his best language, but also because he was Dakota, and he looked Dakota, and that would have been difficult for Alex throughout his life, even in the town that he founded. But the townspeople did come to celebrate his life after he died, but there's still a part of his history that is missing since people don't fully know how to come to terms with him being Dakota. And we look back now and we see that how the townspeople treated Dakota people at the time were not nice, to say the least, but wrong. not allowing them to live here. And it's hard to come to terms with that. So oftentimes, just because it's simpler not to talk about it, Alex's Dakota heritage is often written out of his own story.
Hmm.
So Logan, I know that's something that you and I have been working a lot on, is trying to make that a central part to his story, because it really was.
Definitely.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts on that story? Anything you'd like to add, Logan?
Yeah, I think it's interesting how some of the things that make Alexander Faribault a a special man in our history, a notable and worthwhile man to learn about, are some of the things that we talked about with John North too. Um, it seems like John and Alex both had similar senses that the right thing to do was to treat people well under all circumstances. Um, that that people had dignity and that they should be treated with kindness and respect no matter what, and that it was hard for both of them to do that. John North, because it meant that he had to constantly be moving around, and lots of people disagreed with him, and Alex, because it cost him a lot. Sounds like it pushed him out of Faribault in some ways. um, both of them had to struggle for what they believed was right, but they did what they believed was right. And that's what makes them good people. There's something interesting about the fact that both of these town founders um, had this really strong moral sense to them. I think that's really cool that both of these towns in Rice County have people that they can look up to as their town founders. That there are lessons to learn from these people, even though they lived so long ago.
Absolutely. And we think that, learning about Alex, learning about broader Minnesota history, is important to learn. Alex is called the father of Rice County. And that is important to understand. These smaller stories. Local history can be viewed as smaller stories, but when you connect them to the larger context of everything that's going on, they are these big, beautiful, dramatic stories that we can learn a lot from.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of beauty in being able to draw those parallels between these two towns, and having people that you can look up to. Logan, do you think are there any prompts we can give the kids to learn about this?
Hmm. Well, what are some good places they can go to? I wonder, especially
Mm,
online.
online. Well, we could have them do another Google Maps tour. There's a place in town that is called the Alexander Faribault House, and it's very close to the library. And that would actually be a very good place to see. That was one of the houses that Alex built while he was here. And it is a beautiful little house. It's white and green, and it was where Alex lived. When it's opened again, the Rice County Historical Society actually gives tours of that house, and you can learn a lot about Alex and his family in much more detail than we were able to give here. But also, if you can walk around Faribault digitally, you can see these different places, see these old buildings that were around in Alex's time. And you can consider, what would Alex think of this community? He walked on these very same streets, by these very same buildings. Um, what do you think Alex would think of Faribault and Northfield and Rice County today? Because when he was here, it was just teepees and a trading post.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of beauty in that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, a social distance field trip could also be up to Calvary Cemetery. There's a cemetery in Faribault where Alex and Jean-Baptiste and Pelagie are all buried. And it is a beautiful place if your parents are looking for a 15-minute drive. Um, that can be a beautiful activity. Or, okay,
Whoa.
we can also have them play Monuments Master.
Ooh, that's a good idea. Yeah, that'd be
Yes, there
fun.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a video game online that features a little animation of Alexander Faribault. He has a pretty heavy, thick accent, so we don't know what his voice actually sounded like. But there's a little quiz that you can do to learn about some of the sites around Faribault that Alex would have experienced or been part of in some way. So,
Definitely. So maybe Mrs. Temple can
mhm.
send along a link to that, or
Yeah,
if you Google Monuments Master Faribault.
I'm not sure. Do you want to give it a try?
Yeah. I can try that right now.
Okay. You know what? I'll do it so that we don't have to look at your fingers
Yeah.
when you stall for a bit.
Yeah. So it's we've played this game before, and because it's learning Faribault history is also it's a nice it's a good way to get a sense of what else is going on in as Northfield develops in these early times. So definitely skim over Faribault history, learn about it as much as you can, because it's also really interesting. It's not just Northfield history out there. And Monuments Master is a great, or at least is an introduction to Faribault history in some ways. Sam,
Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen here.
Oh, good idea. Great.
Yes.
So this is what we're in store for.
So you look up Monument Master Faribault, and then here's this first link. It's from the Faribault Heritage Preservation Commission. So you click on that. This should be enabled for most of your stuff, but you might need to get Flash.
Yeah. So there you go. There's their little drawing of Alex. Great.
All right, we can be done with that.
So that's what's in store for you.
There it is. So have fun playing Monument Master, maybe going on some Google Maps tours. Let us know what you think. It can be a fun game to play. We hope you guys enjoyed learning about Alexander Faribault, father of Rice County. And we'll talk to you next time for our last class.
Wow. It's been, wow.
Wow. All right.
Well,
Have a good day,
guys,
guys.
see you later. Bye-bye.